Exclusive contracted novel by Feilu Novel Network. Listening to the trend for 10 years, the identity of Sword God is exposed on the gold list. In the world of comprehensive martial arts, thousands of dynasties stand tall. Xifeng travels through time to become the 9th prince of the Great Qin, obtaining a check.in system and signing into various places to receive rewards. In order to achieve unparalleled cultivation, Xifeng lived in seclusion in the northern Lianxing pavilion for 10 years. One day, heaven and earth have changed, and the golden list has descended. Counting the world's famous sword masters, he has been directly exposed. Xianxia Huang said, Xifeng is indeed fine, and surprisingly, he is the first sword master on the famous sword list. With the exposure of hidden dragon rankings, power rankings, and other rankings, the world shook. Everyone. Surprisingly, Xifeng is the current sword god. The great snow dragon cavalry that destroyed the world is actually Xifeng's army. And those 8 floating butchers. Xianxia Huang said, my son wins the wind and has the posture of a great emperor. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. The heavenly list appears, winning the wind. Seeking freshness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Daqin. In the imperial study of Xianxia Palace. Zhao Gao knelt down on the ground, burying his face in a tone of sadness, yet hiding a deep sense of joy. Your Majesty, more than 10 countries including Han, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, Liang, etc. have been thoroughly investigated, and almost 3 feet of ground has been dug. However, no trace of His Highness Jiu has been found. Please make other plans early on, Your Majesty, to cultivate other princes. Hear his words. Xifeng couldn't help but let out a long sigh, with a hint of despair in his eyes. Your Highness Jiu. What he refers to is naturally his 9th son Xifeng. Since its birth, it seems that it has been born to know it, and has a deep understanding of all things in the world, stunning the entire Qin dynasty. After a period of cultivation, Xifeng naturally regarded him as the heir of the Great Qin. 10 years ago, Xifeng suddenly disappeared without a trace. The first emperor was enraged and the world panicked, attracting thousands of sorcerers to test his luck. The result was that no useful news could be obtained at all. It was widely rumored that the 9th prince Xifeng had died, but the first emperor did not believe it. In the eyes of Xifeng, although Xifeng is naturally proud, he often compares the sun and moon to a ball in his words, and even disdains the gods on earth. But his intelligence and courage are no less than when he was young. Even if we throw him into the wilderness of the far north, those barbarians should also be worried about their safety. I am such a proud Qilin, how could I die silently? Make plans early. Cultivate other princes. Xifeng turned his attention back to this sentence. But it shook its head in an instant. He has given birth to many princes. But what can be said is only Xifeng, Feilu, and Hu Hai. Feilu has always had a weak and unbearable temperament, and he has listened to the words of those corrupt scholars, with a sour and pungent taste all over his body. Hu Hai was even more incapable of being the master, and in his arrogance, he had no ability to control himself. The two of them were already dissatisfied with Xifeng, and now there is Xifeng as a comparison, let alone. Besides, nowadays, there are 10 provinces in the world. Even though the Great Qin had already conquered the 7 kingdoms, there were still countless powerful countries surrounding it, such as Han, Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Liang. There are countless forces of all kinds. There are countless mountains such as Longhu Mountain, Shu Mountain, Ame Mountain, and Yihua Palace. In this situation, how could he trust to hand over the entire Qin dynasty to Feilu or Hu Hai? Only Xifeng is the only and most perfect heir to the Great Qin in his heart. If Xifeng could take control of the Great Qin, Fake for decades. Perhaps the Great Qin was not only able to unify the 7 states, but also able to unify the 9 provinces and dozens of countries, creating a truly unified world. Thinking about the dark and mysterious flag of the Great Qin that spreads throughout the land, illuminated by the sun and moon, and the mountains and rivers that reach it, it is the situation of the territory of the Great Qin. Zheng's heart, however, became even sadder. The premise for all of this is that Yingzi wind energy can smoothly inherit the throne of the Great Qin. But now, it's almost a decade of continuous digging. The whole world still has no trace of winning wind. Other countries outside of the Great Qin, or even countless courtiers of the Great Qin, privately believed that Yingzi had already died. Your Majesty, the fortune of the Great Qin dynasty cannot be gambled on by His Highness Jiao alone. We need to make more plans for the affairs of the Crown Prince. Zhao Gao saw Zheng's face constantly changing, and couldn't help but whisper. Zheng's hesitant expression couldn't help but intensify. But at this moment, outside the palace. But suddenly, the earth and mountains shook. An indescribable aura of majesty suddenly descended from heaven and earth. The starry night in the sky has been rendered into a golden ocean, shimmering with radiance, illuminating the world like daylight, like a god descending tomorrow. The entire palace, or the entire city of Xianxia, and even everyone who saw this scene in the world, were all deeply moved and lifted their heads to look at this unseen scene from ancient times. What happened? What is beyond the sky? How could there be such a commotion? Zheng suddenly stood up, his eyes filled with confusion, and he couldn't help but push aside the cutting board and memorial to walk out. Zhao Gao bowed and followed closely behind. The sky over the entire land of Kyushu is now a dazzling golden hue. Like gold being melted into seawater, causing waves in the sky and carrying the heavens. Against the backdrop of this breathtaking scenery, a wide and majestic scroll slowly rotates and unfolds on its own, like a divine seal. Unexpectedly, lines of handwriting appeared. Make everyone stare on screen. Kyushu Gold List. Famous sword list. The vast 9 provinces have a variety of weapons, and swords are revered. The swordsmen on earth don't know how many million, and the sharp swords don't even know which swordsmen in the world hold millions of swords. Today, the Heavenly Tao will coordinate and list the top 10 famous swords in the world. Anyone who holds a famous sword on the list can be called a human Sword Immortal and receive generous rewards. The inventory is now starting ranked 10th on the famous sword list. Red Eyes. Sword Master. 9 Princes of the Great Qin, Yingzi. P.S. The new book set sail, please support us all. Chapter 2. Inviting the Heartless Person of Moon Lianxing. Liu Bang's. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kyushu Land. The golden ocean rippled in the night sky. A long sword with a red and golden body, engraved with seal characters and red pupils, was being played with by a young man in his hand. The young man had a lazy expression and a stunning and enchanting handsome appearance, with an extraordinary temperament. When the golden list of heaven and earth appears, his name emerges. He seemed to have just realized something and looked up in a daze as he flew proudly. Enable everyone. They all saw his appearance thoroughly and thoroughly. The wind. On the Xianxia palace of the Great Qin dynasty, upon seeing this scene, Zheng suddenly widened his eyes and couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. Zhao Gao, who had thought that Yingzi had already died, was even more shocked. They never imagined it. The first swordsman to be exposed on this Heavenly Tao golden list is actually the 9th Prince of Qin, who has been missing for a full 10 years. In the heart of Qin Emperor Zheng, the heir of Qin, Yingzi. This is not over yet. I saw the golden list changing. Once again, lines of handwriting appeared, undoubtedly exposing more information about Yingzi. Yingzi. The 9th Prince of the Great Qin dynasty. I am currently practicing in the Tingqiao Pavilion of the Northern Liang Prince's mansion, and my swordsmanship is unparalleled. I cannot confirm my true cultivation level, ranked 10th on the gold list. The reward is Tianxian Longevity Pill. Ordinary people can extend their lifespan by 10 years by taking it, while cultivators can gain additional skill enhancement by taking it. Listening to the Chao Pavilion in the prince's mansion of northern Liang, it turns out that Feng heir has been hiding there all along. No wonder I can't find it. Yingzheng looked at the handwriting on the gold list and couldn't help but feel even more shocked. After gradually narrowing the panic in his eyes, Zhao Gao couldn't help but bury his head lower. This 9th prince is not dead yet. This also represents that the position of the next generation of the Grand Qin as the heir apparent is still indestructible and unshakable, and all his careful thoughts can only be reburied. Otherwise, with the abilities demonstrated by the 9th prince 10 years ago, he may have been defeated and thrown into ashes without realizing it. Anyway, as long as the wind is okay. After being shocked, Yingzheng's gaze lingered for a moment on the reward list. He summoned thousands of sorcerers from all over the world, none of whom had ever developed a pill that could prolong life. However, the 10th place on the list rewarded him with this pill, which was truly generous. However, at this moment, compared to this pill, he is more concerned about the safety of his own son, who is also the future heir of the Great Qin. Zhao Gao, take the 6 sword slaves in the palace to search for Feng heir and bring her back to me. If anyone dares to stop along the way, kill without mercy. Yes. Yingzheng was not dead, and the 9th prince was also present. At this moment, Zhao Gao was even more loyal in his heart than a loyal minister, and quickly knelt down to answer. Moving Flower Palace. The highest point in the palace. The palace master invites the moon, with a face as cold as ice, yet as crystal clear and smooth as jade. Her figure is unparalleled, her temperament is extraordinary, and she is delicate and gentle with a heart-wrenching charm. Watching Yingzifeng being exposed on the gold list, he was lost in thought. After a long time, his voice became ethereal and lively, as if extremely cold as he said, "You're such a heartless person. No wonder I haven't been able to find you for 10 years. It turns out you've been hiding in the northern Liang prince's mansion. Sister, we can't let him abandon us and disappear this time." Behind the invitation to the moon, the sweet and delicate dimples seemed like spring flowers. The second palace master, Lianxing, with her eyes moving and her voice sweet, also said lovingly with a pout. 10 years ago. A person claiming to be a person from the Great Qin dynasty came to the Yihua Palace and said he wanted to see the secrets of the Yihua Palace, such as transplanting flowers and grafting trees and the Mingyu Gong. The 2 stunning palace lords naturally felt that the person was here to provoke. They fought fiercely without mercy. But who knows? The 2, along with countless beautiful and young disciples in the palace, were unable to defeat him alone. He still showed mercy. Moving to the Flower Palace is the next way to survive. After that, he briefly stayed in the Yihua Palace for a few days, and in just a few days, he gained the favor of 2 palace masters, and even many female disciples in the Yihua Palace. But who knows? A few days later, he suddenly left. Inviting Moon and Lianxing searched the world but couldn't find him, thinking they would never find him again. Who knew that today, because of the appearance of the Golden List, we could meet again. Da Han. In Changle Palace. Liu Bang couldn't help but feel happy as he watched the famous sword Red Eyes make it onto the list. There is no reason for it. Because of his red pupils, he wore the world-renowned sword with him when he established his country and gained power. Today, Red Eyes made it to the list, and naturally he also made it to the world. Can fluctuate with the handwriting on the gold list. His excitement. But it came to an abrupt end. Sword Master Qin's 9th prince wins Zifeng. What does this mean? Why is the Sword Master the winner of the Qin dynasty, not me? Is the red pupils in my hand fake? Liu Bang forcefully pulled out his long sword from his waist, his face bewildered, as if he had seen evil. This sword. It is his most beloved thing. He carries it around his waist day and night. How could it be fake? In the sky, the red pupil that Lianxing was playing with had a faint red floating gold light that appeared when it was waved, which could not be compared to the ordinary object in his hand. Moreover, with the recognition of the golden list, even if he doesn't believe it anymore, there is only one possibility left. Taking a deep breath, Liu Bang looked at Lianxing, whose cultivation was unknown, on the heavenly list. Suddenly, he calmed down again and suddenly spoke to his side, saying, "Shao He, no matter what method you use, I will send someone to retrieve my supporting sword, Red Eyes, and that heavenly Xian life-extending pill should also be mine." Chapter 3. Red Eyes Out, The World Moves, Endless Envy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sky shimmered with golden light. Like the surging sea of gold, shining through the dark night. Shocked all over the world, countless swordsmen looked at the gold medal table that day with an infinite look of envy and jealousy in their eyes. In their eyes. Practicing swordsmanship for decades is all about achieving success and becoming famous all over the world. Now that the list has appeared, let alone being on it. If I could be mentioned on this list, it would be enough to comfort my life. Even outside the city of Gusu. Xianxia from Wanmei Villa had a hint of envy in her eyes. When he looked at the ancient form of the black scabbard long sword in his hand, he also felt a bit dissatisfied. He is not greedy for fame, but only for pursuing swordsmanship throughout his life. So he knows better than others how high a famous sword can enhance one's swordsmanship skills. Before the sky chart comes out, he only felt that the sword in his hand was already considered a peerless sword. But when the scene of Lianxing caressing the sword appeared in the sky, he was completely shocked. He never expected that there would be such a good sword in the world. The sword's body is red with a lingering red hue, just like the glow of blood. Beyond the crimson hue, there is a golden light floating like a miracle. Such a good sword, if it could fall into his hands, his swordsmanship would probably need to be improved countless times. No way. How can such a good sword be in vain? The 9th prince of the Great Qin couldn't wield a sword at first glance, and the evaluation of him by the heavenly Tao was vague. How could he possess such a peerless sword? Xianxia looked back at her Wanmei villa once again. In the end, he gritted his teeth firmly and left without even saying goodbye to his family. He is going to the Tingqiao Pavilion in Beiliang. Find the 9th prince of the Great Qin and find a way to bring that sword. As a person who only pursues swordsmanship in this lifetime, swordsmanship is everything to him, and that unparalleled sword can almost make him give up everything. Disturbance outside the pavilion. It can be found in the Tingqiao Pavilion. A beautiful and slender woman in blue, looking at the dazzling list, curled her lips in dissatisfaction and said to the handsome young master beside her. "Master, this heavenly Tao is too meddling. Who owns the famous sword and what matters to him? You finally hid it here, but it came to expose it without even asking for opinions. And let's forget about the exposure. Surprisingly, you're just in 10th place. Who does it look down on? If these words are spread, I'm afraid it will make people around the world wide-eyed. Isn't it all for the sake of profit that the world is in turmoil?" But in the air, the green-clad maid was so dissatisfied with the heavenly list. Disappointment actually doesn't matter. The key is to say that the 10th place person looks down on her young master. You should know, this is the 10th place among thousands of sword practitioners from dozens of countries and sects on the land of Kyushu. Its Red Eyes sword ranked 10th, not me ranked 10th. Faced with Ah Qing's arrogant and dissatisfied words, Lianxing calmly shook his head and casually threw the famous sword, Red Eyes, which had just become famous around the world, behind him, not paying much attention to the authenticity. If the day before yesterday when the list showed his current situation, he would also be reflected behind him. That might not just shock the whole world, but to go crazy. Because behind him stood several open sword boxes, all of which were wrapped in extraordinary brilliance. Compared to red pupils, not only is it not weak, but it seems to be several points stronger. But this day, there are indeed many things going on. After casually responding to Qing, Zifeng nodded slightly and said. He was originally a traveler, but 10 years ago he awakened to the system and needed to sign in all over the world to receive rewards. Therefore, concealing one's identity in traveling around the world. I have been checking in at the Chowga in recent days, and in just a few more days, I will be able to obtain the land immortal cultivation. You should know that the world's martial arts are divided into 4 levels. Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow. Each level is further divided into 3 levels. Upper, Middle, and Lower. And the division of strength. Apart from the low-level 9th level, there are only 5 levels. Grandmaster, Grandmaster, Divine Wanderer, Land Immortal, and Heavenly Man. He is currently in a state of divine wandering, only 1 step away from the Land Immortals. Unexpectedly, in the past few days, Tiandao suddenly appeared on the gold list, exposing him. The next few days. Inside the Chao Pavilion, Zifeng and Qing chatted calmly. Outside the Tingchao Pavilion, Su Fengnian, as the Crown Prince of Northern Liang, was shocked and looked at the old man in the mansion, Huang Sun, in confusion. When did the 9th Prince of the Great Qin sneak into the Tingchao Pavilion? You should know. There are many enemies in the Northern Liang Prince's mansion. The guards inside and outside the mansion are naturally as strict as the imperial palace. And Tingchao Pavilion is also the place where Beiliang stored the martial arts secrets that were collected from various major sects in the world. From the ground floor to the highest floor, there are countless skilled guards. But now he is the Crown Prince of Beiliang. If it weren't for the exposure of the Golden List, he had no idea at all what happened when Zifeng climbed up the stairs, and even how many days he had stayed inside. How could this kind of thing not shock him? I don't know either. Faced with his inquiry, old Huang just shook his head and his eyes were also filled with fear. Do you want to go in and fight him? You carry a sword box every day, and my dad even said you're a master of swordsmanship. Now that you've met a famous sword master in the world, don't you want to give it a try? If we win, maybe we can even snatch that red pupil. Su Fengnian looked at the sword box on Lao Huang's back, which was tightly attached to him, and suddenly became interested and asked. P.S. The new book needs everyone's care, and the author is seeking fresh flowers online. Seeking collection. Chapter 4. Lao Huang's reverence for the 9th Prince. Seeking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Fengnian playfully looked at old Huang beside him. He was persecuted by the Liang royal family at the beginning. I have no choice but to travel around the world. The king of Northern Liang only found old Huang, a groom who seemed to have lost all his front teeth. As his personal guard, he thought he was going to die in the martial arts world. But who knows? Under the protection of old Huang, he wandered the rivers and lakes for 3 years and 6,000 miles without encountering any danger. Only when he returned did he realize that old Huang was a peerless swordsman. At this moment, I naturally want to know which one is stronger or weaker than the one in the Tingchao Pavilion, my own Lao Huang. You can hear his inquiry. Old Huang's face suddenly changed, he covered his mouth and looked carefully at the Tingchao Pavilion, saying. Your Highness, please don't talk nonsense. If we offend His Highness inside, even if we are in the palace, we cannot afford it. This action immediately left Su Fengnian's face bewildered and shocked again. Isn't the one in the Chowga just ranked 10th on the list of famous swords? Why could Lao Huang be so frightened? At this moment, the golden chart in the sky has once again changed. It regained the attention of everyone in Kyushu, causing everyone to look up at the sky. Golden light surges forth. The handwriting on Tianbang is constantly changing. All the swordsmen in the world are excited and nervous. If the famous swords they treasure in their hands could be listed on this list, wouldn't it be overnight that they would become famous all over the world? And not to mention it. Rewards will also be given during the selection of the gold list. The Tianxian longevity pill, which was distributed along with the selection of the red eyebrow sword, may not be of much concern to Yingzifeng, but who else in the world doesn't envy it? 10-year lifespan. People who practice martial arts can also improve their cultivation by using it. This is simply an elixir that can cause a lot of competition among people in the martial arts world, okay? If it weren't for the fact that during the selection of the golden list, the identity of Yingzifeng as the 9th Prince of Qin and his location in the northern Liang Tingqiao Pavilion were highlighted. There are countless people in the world who are greedy for profit, and they have long been restless. Above the sky, with a surge of gold. The handwriting on the scroll of the golden list. It also resurfaced. Kyushu Gold List. Famous sword list. The vast 9 provinces have a variety of weapons, and swords are revered. The inventory is now starting, number 9 on the famous sword list. Huanlu Sword. Sword Master. Bailiang Swordsman, Sword 9 Yellow. He is currently practicing in the palace of the Prince of Bailiang and his strength is close to that of a master. He originally came from a sword-making blacksmith background and has an extraordinary understanding of swordsmanship. In addition to the Huanlu sword, he has also crafted several good swords ranked 9th on the gold list. The reward is Wash Marrow and Solidify Pill. Taking it can wash away impurities in the body, with pure talent and a lot of lean cultivation. Chang'an City. Inside the imperial palace of the Tang dynasty. Watching the handwriting reappear from the sky's golden chart. Li Shimin couldn't help but sigh and looked behind him at the famous swords collected from various parts of China, with a hint of helplessness on his face. Since seeing the golden list and confirming that the heavenly way does not care about cultivation, only selects the master of famous swords. He collected so many famous swords in a very short period of time. In order to receive rewards. But who knew? But it's also true. The ordinary swords behind him. How can it be compared to famous swords like Red Eyes and Yellow Mansions on the list? Did you not see that Jian Huang, with nearly the cultivation of a master, has forged a sword for a lifetime, but only the best Huanlu sword has ascended to the 9th position? Wudi City Head. Countless martial arts heroes gather here. When the 9th ranked sword list was released, it naturally caused a lot of amazement and jealousy. Even if those who can stand at this city are all famous people from the martial arts world marching around the world, how many famous people from the martial arts world are like crucian carp crossing the river? Even if it's famous. A few years later, will they still be suppressed by the new younger generation? Before this, if one can gain recognition from the golden list, it is truly the world's 9 provinces are famous, and there is no need to worry about their reputation falling into dust. The 9th place is actually the Huanlu sword of Sword 9 Yellow. When he lost the battle against Wang Leiguai in the city of Emperor Wu, I thought he had lost all his swords. I thought so too, but now it seems that it's not just about not losing the sword, but even closer to the Grandmaster realm. What's important is that the Northern Liang Prince's mansion actually has 2 famous swords. That's right, the 9th and 10th place famous swords are both located in the Tingqiao Pavilion of Bailiang, truly worthy of being the world's collection of martial arts books. I heard that Jian Huang, a middle-aged swordsman, is not very talented in practicing swordsmanship. This time, he received the marrow washing pill bestowed by the golden list, and it is estimated that he can really break through his master in one fell swoop and fight in the city of Emperor Wu. There are many things in the martial arts world, but they are the most troublesome. Watching the changes in the gold list, Emperor Wu's city was full of discussions, and even a few monster-level cultivators in the city were constantly changing their expressions. They originally thought, a red-eyed sword in this world is enough to amaze the world. But who knew so quickly, a second famous sword was released on the gold list, and it was also at the Tingqiao Pavilion in Bailiang. Chapter 5. Lao Huang's idol level goals. Reaching gold again. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Lao Huang, are you Jianzhou Huang? The Prince of Beiliang's mansion heard from His Excellency Chao that although he had already guessed about Lao Huang's strength, Su Fengnian's face was still shocked and authentic as he watched the sky chart reveal it directly. Sword 9 Yellow. Legend has it that he only started learning swordsmanship in middle age, and before that, he was just a blacksmith making swords. But in just a few years, he had mastered several sword techniques. Can climb up to the city of Emperor Wu and fight alone in the martial arts world, known as the monster of Wang Lao monster. Although defeated. But this kind of achievement is just a matter of being proud even if you lose. He thought that old Huang was just a notorious swordsman in the martial arts world, but to his surprise, he was a swordsman who was famous all over the world and close to the level of a master. After losing to Wang Laiguai, I felt shameless and had to thank the young master for taking me in. Faced with Su Fengnian's shock, Jianzhou Huang smiled lightly and said, revealing two toothless large holes in his mouth, as if he were a groom with the wind blowing through. Before the golden list is exposed. Who would have thought that he was the world-renowned Sword 9 Yellow? Su Fengnian remained silent for a moment before accepting this fact. With some hesitation, he spoke up and said, you were defeated by Wang Laiguai, and it is well known that you only practiced martial arts in your middle age due to your poor qualifications. Now we have the wash marrow pill bestowed by the heavenly way. Do you still want to challenge yourself? Wang Laiguai, formerly known as Wang Prophet, was the lord of Emperor Wu's city and a famous warrior in the world. He claimed to be the second most famous warrior in the world. Losing to such a person is not a shame. But the problem is, if our old Huang fights again, will he be able to win? If he doesn't win, he will also anger Wang Laiguai, and his life will be at risk. No. Faced with Su Fengnian's inquiry, there was a hint of admiration in old Huang's eyes. He turned his head to look at the nearby Tingqiao pavilion and said, I now have a higher goal. If we can win the sword on the attic. What did Prophet Wang calculate? Su Fengnian's eyes were suddenly shocked, and he suddenly turned his head to look at the Tingqiao pavilion on the side. The one upstairs. Are you referring to the 9th prince of the Great Qin? What kind of cultivation is this person? Can Lao Huang, who can fight against Wang Laiguai, say this? Old Huang did not explain further, but moved his steps towards the Tingqiao pavilion. He really wants to meet the swordsmanship of the one upstairs. The top floor of Tingqiao pavilion. A narrow collection of books that has not been exposed to sunlight for years. Sitting in front of the chessboard, Li Shan was also shocked to see the golden chart in the sky. As the first strategist of Beiliang, he naturally knew the identity of Lao Huang, but what he didn't know was that Huang Lu's sword was still in the hands of Jianzhou Huang. Initially, Jianzhou Huang was defeated by Wang Laiguai. Everyone says he can only abandon a sword on the city of Emperor Wu in order to escape from it. Li Shan originally thought that the sword Zhou Huang abandoned would definitely be his best Huang Lu sword, and after that failure, his realm was bound to plummet. That's why. Li Shan remained silent only after realizing that he had boldly intruded into the Tingqiao pavilion, where he had been living for years. Anyway, there's no malicious intent in Yingzifeng. In this situation, except for many guards and the close contacts of the prince in the mansion, only Jianzhou Huang is the highest combat power, so it is naturally difficult to conflict with that person. But now, Jianzhou Huang not only did not experience a significant decline in strength, but also surged to near the level of a master, and he held the Huanglu sword in his hand. So should we argue with the two people who entered the Tingqiao pavilion? No way. Jianzhou Huang now knows that he is in the pavilion. But with his loyalty to Fengnian, he did not directly attack and curse, which shows that even the peak sword Zhou Huang feels that he cannot defeat those two people. Just as he had just started to think, Li Shan suddenly suppressed his thoughts and keenly sensed something was wrong. As a top strategist, his thoughts can be described as fleeting. The gaze towards the downstairs was even more shocking. Can hold down the top-notch sword Huang. The strength of the ninth prince of the Great Qin downstairs is probably countless levels higher than he imagined. Not only Li Yishan, but also the entire northern young prince's mansion knows that someone dares to invade the various experts of Tingqiao Pavilion. Upon learning that Lao Huang was Jian Huang. After thinking about the moment that made them feel uneasy, they all carefully buried their heads again, pretending to be completely unaware that someone had entered their attic. It is precisely at this moment. The full shock in their hearts has not yet dissipated. In the rippling golden light, the text on the scroll changed again, and new handwriting appeared, causing everyone to hastily look up. Kyushu Gold List. Famous sword list. The vast 9 provinces have a variety of weapons, and swords are revered, 8th place on the famous sword list. The Liang Long K Sword. Sword Master. 9 princes of the Great Qin, winning Zifeng. I am currently practicing in the Tingqiao Pavilion of the Northern Liang Prince's mansion, and my swordsmanship is unparalleled. I cannot confirm my true cultivation level, ranked 8th on the gold list. The reward is Xianxia lower level body method. Juying technique. It can be applied to fields such as swordsmanship, boxing, and lightness skills. Chapter 6. Double swords dominate the charts. The whole world is amazed. Seeking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Liang Long K Sword. It's Ing Zi Feng again. Li Yishan, the top strategist of Beiliang at the top of the Tingqiao Pavilion, suddenly burst into a cold sweat from behind. Just now. He was still thinking of asking Jian Huang to teach Ing Zifeng a lesson downstairs. But who knew that after only a brief moment, the name of Ing Zifeng appeared on the gold list after a flash. A person, or rather a force. Having a famous sword in hand can also be understood as a coincidence or having great luck in one's body. But if he has 2 or even more famous swords, then it is by no means a word of luck that can be simply summarized. Not to mention, Li Yishan is the strongest strategist in Beiliang. How could he not know that the 2 famous swords in Ing Zifeng's hand, one with red pupils, should have been the sword of Emperor Liu Bang of Han, and the other with the great cool dragon sparrow, were also closely related to Northern Liang. The important swords of 2 top powers have both fallen into the hands of one person, Katsuke's. The things involved here are not easy no matter how you look at them. Fortunately, I took a cautious step. I didn't just go downstairs and offend the 9th prince of the Great Qin, otherwise the Northern Liang prince's mansion would probably be upside down at this moment. Li Yishan tightly held a chess piece in his hand and murmured to himself with a grateful expression on his face. One of the inheritors of other dynasties, coupled with extraordinary strength. This kind of person is difficult to befriend. How can we offend again? After careful consideration, he placed the chess pieces on the chessboard again and played with himself, pretending to be completely unaware of the fact that the 9th prince of the Great Qin had secretly entered the Tingqiao Pavilion. Just hope that Ying Zifeng can get what he wants from here and leave on his own. Don't trouble them with Beiliang. Tang Dynasty. Inside the palace of Chang'an City. Li Shimin has given up the idea of collecting famous swords and receiving heavenly rewards. He could also see that the top 10 famous swords in the world were not something that ordinary people could hold. Even if there were people in the territory of the Tang Dynasty who had a handful in their hands. It's not something he can easily obtain without paying any price at his command. But he still looked at the changing golden list with envy. After launching the Xuanwu Gate incident, his reputation in history can be said to be filthy. That's why. He just wants to wash away his dirty reputation with great achievements. If he could achieve a gold ranking, he would naturally be able to suppress countless dirty names at once. Unfortunately, I want to obtain a real sword like the famous sword. Wait, too. Li Shimin, who was still amazed in the previous second, was suddenly shocked in the next moment, staring at the sky chart with a shocked expression on his face. What did he see? De Liang Long Ke, Sword Master wins Zifeng. But this winning wind already has a red pupil sword, doesn't it? Why can we make it to the list again with a famous sword? Do you think he has two? As a ruler of a country, he finds it difficult to obtain a famous sword. But surprisingly, someone who can obtain two famous swords at once and even make it all on the list. What exactly is the origin of that Yingzifeng? A mere title of the 9th prince of the great Qin dynasty cannot compare to the fame of two famous swords certified by the heavenly list. Changsun Wuji. Li Shimin stared at the ranking on the sky chart, hesitated for a moment, and then called out from behind. I am here, replied the famous Tang official Changsun Wuji, bowing down. The crown prince of the great Qin can monopolize two famous swords, but don't we have a single famous sword in the vast Tang dynasty? Li Shimin asked in a deep voice. Upon hearing this, Changsun Wuji, however, had no choice but to bow his head. If it weren't for the exposure of the heavenly way, who would know that those famous swords are in their hands? So how does Li Shimin answer this question? If you search with me, I really don't believe it anymore. Man de Tong can't find a famous sword. Li Shimin, who had already given up searching, spoke again heavily. Changsun Wuji could only bow his head and say yes. On his face, he felt even more helpless. I can only hope that there will no longer be a second-place holder of two famous swords on the gold list. Otherwise, who knows if their own emperor will be stimulated again. But he probably wouldn't have thought of it. The second person with a pair of famous swords is difficult to appear, but Daqin. Outside the Xianxia palace, Zhao Gao had just gathered his troops to head to Baoyang when he saw the golden list in the sky changing again. I couldn't help but tremble. The fear in his eyes was even stronger, and he whipped the horse fiercely, quickly heading towards the north. In his heart, he sighed inwardly. Fortunately, he didn't use any small means. Otherwise, when the 9th prince returned to Qin, he might have been dismembered by 5 horses. He really didn't expect it. That 9th prince disappeared for 10 years and not only did not die. On the contrary, they are still in the world, and I don't know what opportunities they have gained. It seems that their power is even stronger than 10 years ago. Zhao Gao knows very well. 10 years ago, even if he didn't know martial arts and didn't have a famous sword in his hand, that 9th prince was enough to govern the entire Qin dynasty with everyone's confidence. If he comes back with the name of Tianbang this time, I'm afraid I'll have to take the whole Qin with me. Stepping into an unimaginable stage again. In the Xianxia palace, Yingzheng naturally did not know what Zhao Gao was thinking. But this did not prevent him from having the eunuch set out his wine, kick various memorials aside, and shout excitedly while drinking. Fenger, I knew you wouldn't die. Over the past decade, you must have realized something was wrong in the world, that's why you left Daqin. But now these are not important anymore. What's important is that as long as you come back, the future crown prince position of Daqin belongs to you. At that time, I, Daqin, can once again conquer the power of the world and join forces with the entire Kyushu continent. Chapter 7. Swordsman Envy. Sword Manor Envies. Seeking. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Yuyan Mountain Villa. The lake in the village was calm, but the swordsmen who stayed overnight in the village were all clamoring and stirring. You should know. Yuyan Mountain Villa is a famous sword villa in the world. There are countless good swords in the world, all crafted from this sword manor. But now there are already 3 famous swords on the gold list, yet none of them are produced by the sword manor. How can this not make these people who come to buy swords and seek swords suspicious? And regarding this, Zhang Bingling from the villa, and even the young villa owner and others, could only smile bitterly. At the beginning, when Red Eyebrow Sword made it to the list, they thought there might still be a chance for the swords produced by their own sword farm. After all, the swords made in the villa have been around for hundreds of years. The swords produced from time to time are not only hundreds of thousands but also tens of thousands, and they are all high-quality and excellent swords. You can see Huang Lu, who is ranked 9th on the gold list. They know. Opportunity, it's gone. You should know that Huang was originally a renowned swordsman in the world, with exceptional swordsmanship and unparalleled fame. He even fought against Wang Laiguai. Such a person. Is the sword crafted for oneself based on one's own understanding of swordsmanship comparable to that of Yuyan Mountain Villa? But if it's gone, then it's gone. They can also be considered convinced. But when the 8th place on the gold list appeared, they suddenly froze. It's not that there are any doubts about that sword. Others don't know about the Daliang Dragon Sparrow sword, but how could they not know about the Yuyan Mountain Villa where they made the sword? That's one of the best swords in the Wu family sword tomb, and it's also the sword of the wife of the northern young prince. They dare not question this sword. The problem is the sword master. Surprisingly, they are the same person as the 10th famous sword, Qitong. I have been crafting swords in Yuyan Mountain Villa for 100 years, and the famous swords I have crafted are unknown to everyone in the world. What major sects have not used our swords? But now, if none of our swords can make it to the list, that's all. The key is to be on the gold list. Surprisingly, someone can hold 2 famous swords on the list at the same time, this. The young owner of Yuyan Mountain Villa, Zhang Chunlin, had a face full of shock and jealousy, looking at the sky's golden list in disbelief and repeatedly making a sound. Who could have thought of it? Who can really see it again? 2 famous swords from all over the world, how could they enter the hands of one person? This person is not simple. The famous sword itself carries sword energy. If the sword does not obey the master, the erosion of sword energy alone is enough to cause ordinary people to die. He carries 2 famous swords, but he can still roam freely, and he also stays in the Tingqiao Pavilion, which is densely populated in the northern Liang dynasty, to practice. Absolutely a master among the masters. Compared to the young village head Zhang Chunlin, the village head Zhang Binglin has more courage and a higher vision. At a glance, he knows that the winning sun wind that has been on the gold list twice is not something they can provoke. Quickly speaking out a warning to the children of their own sword village. Make it within the sword manor. The disciples who were still full of anger just now all had a sudden expression on their faces, looking at the name on the gold list with a touch of respect. They are from the sword-making family. Nature knows how difficult it is to conquer the famous sword. But within the villa, the swordsmen who stayed overnight to buy swords or made appointments to pick them up were unaware, and the noise grew louder and louder. This winning style is a bit too rampant. Even a generation of young swordsmen have never left any reputation in the martial arts world. How dare they hide 2 famous swords? That's right, why don't we go to the northern young prince's mansion together and bring these 2 famous swords? The heavenly level Jueying secret scripts gifted by the golden list can also be practiced together. If you want to go, add me. A group of drunken swordsmen, with envy and jealousy in their eyes that could not be concealed, stood on the table and waved their swords, shouting loudly. The knight under the table, who was clear-headed and cautious in his thoughts, was in great fear and repeatedly spoke out to persuade him. Are you crazy? That Ying Zifeng is the 9th prince of the Great Qin, and he is currently staying in the Tingqiao Pavilion of the northern Liang prince's mansion. Who dares to trouble him? Isn't that asking for death? A kind persuasion. Falling into the ears of those swordsmen, it seemed like mocking their cowardice and fear of death, causing them to wield their swords and roar. Who's afraid of him? There are dozens of dynasties in the world, and there are even hundreds of royal descendants. Who would lack a small prince who has been wandering outside for nearly a decade? And besides, we can't enter the Chao Gu. He must come out anyway. I don't believe he won't come out for the rest of his life. You know, those are 2 famous swords. If you can get a handle, it will be enough to make it to the gold list and shock the world, not to mention the value of those rewards and famous swords themselves. Brother who dares to go, come with me and get the famous sword to eat and drink spicy food together. I don't know if what the drunken person said has some truth, or if the swordsmen all over the world crave those two famous swords to the point of sacrificing themselves and forgetting death. He shouted loudly these few times. Surprisingly, someone stood up, packing their luggage like setting off. Their eyes were fixed on the big cool dragon sparrow sword on the gold list, as if they were looking at a giant treasure that could make them famous overnight. Seeing the Lord of Yuyan Mountain Villa and others in silence. Resolutely cross out their names from the guest list of Yuyan Mountain Villa, and even give priority to the swords they have reserved for others. Treat them like dying people. P.S. New book requires the support of all the big shots. Chapter 8. Saint and Fairy Double Love. Seeking Fresh Flowers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Emperor steps on the peak. In the Zihang Jingjai sect. Saint Consort Xian stood at the peak, her stunning and refined figure captivating countless admiring disciples in the sect. However, at this moment, she furrowed her brows and lightly lifted her cherry lips, murmuring softly, "Is it the Northern Liang Prince's mansion again? What's good there for you to hide there?" What she said about you was not referring to Lao Huang. But it's Yingzifeng, who holds two famous swords from the heavenly list. The Zihang Jingjai sect is one of the righteous sects in the world, dedicated to supporting a wise ruler to resolve the conflicts and turmoil in the world. And she is a saint of the Zihang Jingjai sect. I personally went down the mountain, searching everywhere for the legendary Ming Jun. By chance, she met Yingzifeng, who was wandering around the world. From her travels with Yingzifeng, she confirmed that he was the Ming Jun she was looking for. She not only pinned her hopes for the sect on Yingzifeng, but also entrusted her full admiration to him. But who knows? Along the way, she concealed her admiration and dared not disclose it to you Yingzifeng. But I met the demonic witch Wan again. Good and evil are not at odds. When they meet, they naturally have a big fight, but unfortunately, her skills are slightly inferior and she can only be defeated. Fortunately. At that time, Yingzifeng made a move. With just one move, I subdued Wan. Unfortunately, at that time, Yingzifeng didn't pay too much attention to Wan, so he actually let her escape. Those past memories flashed through my mind. Shifei Xian's face suddenly showed a faint pink blush, and the extraordinary and refined temperament of Yinglin suddenly became irresistible. Her cherry lips opened again and murmured. Anyway, no matter what. I finally found your trace this time. Whether it's for the sake of the righteousness of the dynasty or to express my love clearly, this trip to Beiliang is a must. I just hope you haven't forgotten me yet. Say it. Unexpectedly, I don't want to stay any longer. Directly jumping up from the Emperor's treading peak, with white clothes fluttering, heading straight towards the direction of Beiliang. Yingui sect. A woman with an unparalleled appearance but a charming and ghostly temperament, also standing among the sects, quietly watching the floating golden list in the sky. She is exactly the demon girl Wan in the eyes of Shifei, who is almost irreconcilable. After encountering Shifei by chance. Good and evil do not coexist. She made a direct move and severely injured Shifei, almost getting to know her directly. But unfortunately, the man suddenly took action. One sword. With just one sword, she couldn't catch her breath. If it weren't for begging for mercy in time, the man wouldn't have cared about her at all, causing her to escape by chance. At this moment, she probably has no bones left. So you are the 9th prince of the Great Qin. And in his hand, he also held two world-renowned swords in a row. No wonder the power of that sword was so terrifying. Wan looked at the figure of the man on the golden list, which was not as full of hatred as Shifei had imagined, but rather full of infinite curiosity. She has been a demonic witch since childhood. So when dealing with others, it is natural to be ruthless and disregard any consequences. In fact, I have long been prepared in my heart that once I am defeated, I will definitely be driven to death by others, and my bones will be shattered. But that defeat. Yingzifeng didn't care about her identity at all, and just let her go, which gave her a different feeling. The humiliation of both defeat and defeat. Fearing the power of that sword, there was no intention of rebellion, but there was a hint of submission in my heart. After being defeated, he returned to the sect. I often dream that I admire her superb swordsmanship and am willing to be a maid beside her. Pooh, pooh, pooh. Thinking of what had happened in her dream, Wan blushed instantly. After looking left and right and realizing that no one was around, she felt relieved this time. She is the legitimate demon girl of the Yin Gui sect. Even if I really want to be by his side, at least it's still a concubine or something. How can one only serve as a maid? Not right. What kind of ghost is consort? Fairy girl. I am a witch. The main palace is not impossible, is it? Wan's mind was full of thoughts, and all of a sudden it seemed chaotic. She didn't realize that her face was getting redder and redder, almost to the point of being seductive. Bailiang. In the army of 300,000 iron cavalry. Su Shao looked at the golden chart in the sky, his eyes also trembling. Tingqiao Pavilion, it is the most heavily guarded attic in his royal palace, next to his own residence. What is stored inside are all secrets and various confidential documents of Bailiang. At this moment, someone silently touched me. And what shocked him even more? It's the Daliang Dragon Sparrow sword. There is no reason for it. Because this sword was originally the sword of his queen Wu Su, who was also the mother of Su Fengnian. Back then, Wu family sword tomb almost sent hundreds of warriors and sword formations to force me to exchange swords in Bailiang for this sword. But when Su Heir left the Wu family, this sword had actually disappeared and disappeared. How could it be in his hands now? Su Shao stared closely at the cool dragon sparrow on the golden list, with deep longing in her eyes. After a moment of hesitation. Surprisingly, he turned around and left the army, heading towards the middle of the royal mansion. Chapter 9. Planning thousands of plans. Pressing down Sword Tomb and Sword Immortal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Daliang Dragon Sparrow Sword. Inside the Chao Pavilion, Yingzifeng looked at his second famous sword on the list, and a hint of contemplation flashed in his eyes. Needless to say. Just look at the ranking on the gold list to know. This sword is more than 1 point stronger than the previous red eyebrow sword. Compared to others, the sword body is more spacious, and when swung, one can only see the chirping of dragons and sparrows in the dark, like a heavy warrior sword. But actually, this is a sword made for women. It was just a coincidence that it fell into his hands. Wu Su is also an extraordinary woman. I didn't expect that after saving your life, you really helped the Northern Yang King establish such a foundation. Even the Wu family sword tomb cannot easily trouble you again. Yingzifeng's eyes flickered as he looked outside the pavilion, seeing the smoke and dust shaking outside the city, as if there was a large army practicing. He couldn't help but put down his sword and said, "Young master, who is Wu Su?" Upon hearing Yingzifeng's words, the maid Qing's eyes twirled agilely and she spoke with some caution to inquire. She also followed Yingzifeng when he left the state of Qin and traveled around the world. So I am not familiar with some things. But she knows. There are simply too many women secretly scheming for their own young master in this world. So as a young master and maid, she must be careful. Don't say what to block. But at the very least, it can't be too much. Otherwise, how many places will she be in? Wu Su was the consort of Prince Su Shao of Northern Liang, and also the sword tomb of the previous generation of the Wu family, and even one of the rare sword immortals in the world. Seeing Qing curious. Envies couldn't help but recall the past and casually said. At that time, the king of Northern Liang had not yet become a king, and Wuxia broke away from his own mother's family, the Wu family sword tomb, and fled with this great Liang dragon sparrow sword. Wu family sword tomb is naturally unwilling. After all, the daughter of our own generation of sword immortals, married a small military household who had served in the war and also came from a peasant family background. Just don't give the dowry to the military households, and even kidnap their own world-renowned swords. Who would be willing to do that? On the spot, dozens of sword formation experts were dispatched, along with countless swordsmen and dead soldiers in the sword tomb, who relentlessly pursued and severely injured them. I happened to pass by. After adjusting it casually, both sides dispersed. Wuxia, in order to be grateful and cut off his connection with the Wu family sword tomb, disposed of this sword with me. Envies has a relaxed and casual demeanor. But Qing is not a fool, and of course he can imagine the severity of the situation at that time. The Wuxia sword tomb is known as the world's #1 sword storage villa, not because there are several famous swords inside the tomb that suppress swordsmen. Now that someone has dug up their sword fairy-level daughter and lost a famous sword, how could they be willing to give up? And on Wuxia's side, a dignified king of Northern Liang, even though he had not yet become a king at that time, he was still a famous military household in the world, coupled with Wuxia, a woman with the power of a sword immortal. Unexpectedly, they were both forced to that extent by the sword tomb. How could they be kind again? Speaking of my own young master. When he travels around the world, he always hides his name and will definitely not use his identity as the Prince of Qin to suppress others. So, that's why. How did the young master persuade Wu Jianzhong and Wuxia to reconcile at that time? I'm afraid it wasn't typing that quietly turned into persuasion. A sword formation that even a female sword immortal could not defeat, and countless sword attendants and warriors, under the pressure of their own young master, had to give up pursuit. I guess this is the real situation. Put it this way. It was precisely because of the presence of the young master that the Prince of Northern Liang was able to obtain the help of Wuxia, a female sword immortal, and finally lay such a great foundation. After confirming that Wuxia was not the rival he needed to worry about, Qin couldn't help but immerse himself in the story of his own young master and spoke in surprise. It won't have such a big impact. Prince Su Xiao of Beiliang is also a remarkable figure. Envies shook his head lightly and said nonchalantly. Back then. He just checked in, so he casually tried his skills, but he really didn't think about so many things. Qin doesn't think so. She knows how much profit a sword immortal can bring to one faction in a chaotic world. In her eyes, my own young master is planning countless things. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to say whether Wuxia could have survived and whether Su Xiao could have become the king of Northern Liang if the young master had not taken action. And if Su Xiao cannot become the king of Northern Liang. In this palace of the Northern Liang dynasty, the young master himself is staying at the Tingqiao Pavilion, so it is definitely impossible to build it. From rescuing Wuxia to now when our young master specifically came to listen to the cultivation of chaoga, everything seems to be connected. Someone has arrived. I didn't pay much attention to Qing's thoughts. Envies just lowered his head slightly and glanced under the Tingqiao attic, saying. I saw it on the ground floor of the building. Huang, who had ranked 9th on the gold list, was indeed leading Su Fengnian up the stairs. It is precisely at this moment. The golden chart above the sky has changed once again. P.S. The new book set sail, and I hope that the big shots who love this book can support us. The author's bacteria are stable and updated, providing everyone with the best reading experience, seeking fresh flowers. Seeking collection. Chapter 10. Female Sword Immortal. 10,000 swords are not worth one. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Kyushu Sky. The stars move and drift, and the sun and moon rotate slightly. The majesty that made everyone unconsciously rise again came. Above the dazzling golden starry sea, the golden chart swayed gently again, revealing clear lines of handwriting that caught everyone's eye. Make the swordsmen of the whole world move their hearts and minds. Famous sword list, 7th place. Huang sword. Sword master. Cuehua. I am currently practicing at the Wu family's 10,000 swords burial cemetery, ranked 7th on the gold list. The reward is Wan Yen Shi Ju Dan. Taking it can maintain one's appearance, not age for 100 years, and can greatly improve swordsmanship. Cuehua. Is this name, sword master, a woman? Gu Jian Su Wang is a peerless divine weapon who can defeat the Wu family sword tomb with 160,000 good swords. How could he be subdued and used by a woman? She is practicing at the Wu family sword tomb, so she should be a disciple of the Wu family. Has the Wu family produced another famous female sword immortal? I don't think so. How difficult it is to become a sword immortal, a woman. Various discussions were heard around the world, and countless swordsmen were questioning and shaking their minds, staring at the words on the sky chart for an unknown amount of time. The list of famous swords is already only 10 places. Among them, that crown prince of Qin, he even monopolized 2 of them. And there are not many swordsmen like Huang who hide their names and possess exceptional strength. In this situation, every famous sword that can make it to the gold list is priceless. Everyone naturally hopes to have one more self or a sword related to themselves on the list. But unexpectedly, another woman took up another seat. Many people are naturally dissatisfied. But no matter how dissatisfied you are, you can only complain. After all, the name of Su Wang's sword has long been famous throughout the world. The Wu family sword tomb has been using this sword almost every generation, and who dares to question it? It's just a pity. The number of spots on the list of famous swords is one less out of thin air. Those villa owners who hide in various sword tombs and swords manors, hoping to climb to the top of their own ranks and make a name for themselves, may be disappointed. A veteran swordsman in the martial arts world looked at the ranking on the gold list and couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. Bentu spent his entire life searching for a sword, but he was not even as good as a famous woman, let alone the Prince of Daqin who held 2 famous swords. At the end of the day, in this world, it still depends on luck and talent. Surprisingly, she is also a female sword immortal. Isn't all the swordsman luck of Wu family sword tomb in recent years attributed to women? Not far from Bailiang City, Su Xiao, who was driving his horse towards the city, couldn't help but pause for a moment when he saw the changes on the sky chart. You should know. His queen Wu Su was a female sword immortal from the previous generation of the Wu family's sword tomb. How many years have passed since then? Wu family sword tomb has produced another generation of sword immortals, and they are also female sword immortals. But speaking of it, the Wu family sword tomb is also worthy of the name of the world's first sword tomb. I lost a Daliang dragon sparrow sword, but I can still climb to the gold list with a Su Wang sword, both ranking 7th and 8th. After being surprised, Su Xiao couldn't help but think of the 9th prince of Qin again. The Wu family sword tomb has been famous for hundreds of years. It can be regarded as one of the most famous swordsmanship forces in the martial arts world. Isn't its greatest confidence due to the 2 world-renowned swords, Su Wang and Daliang Long Quebec? Besides that, the 160,000 good swords in the sword tomb have become mere additions. But now, the Wu family sword tomb only has 1 famous sword left. But in the hands of the 9th prince of Daqin, he actually had 2 famous swords that had been exposed and certified on the gold list. That's not to say. If we talk about the swords of the world, the 9th prince of Qin has the ability to suppress the Wu family sword tomb and establish a famous sword farm on his own. That's just the Wu family's Su Wang sword, which was 1 point stronger than the Deliang Dragon Sparrow sword by chance, otherwise the Wu family sword tomb might really lose face this time. After his thoughts dissipated, Prince Su Xiao of Northern Liang shook his head again and threw these things out of his mind. What he is most concerned about now. Why did the Deliang Dragon Sparrow sword of his deceased queen Wu Su fall into the hands of Ing Zifeng in the state of Qin? Wu family sword tomb. Hundreds of thousands of swords are buried here. The sky was shrouded in black clouds, and the soaring sword energy was rampant and extraordinary. Ordinary people don't even want to choose swords from this place to take them. They may be torn into pieces of flesh by the sword energy before entering. It is precisely this environment. Only then did it ensure that every generation of Wu family sword tomb could produce at least one sword master to roam the martial arts world and strengthen the reputation of the Wu family. Unfortunately, the 2 recent generations just happened to be women. Fortunately, Su Wangjian made it to the list. And its momentum also surpasses that of the Deliang Dragon Sparrow sword. As Su Xiao had imagined, dozens of Wu family swordsmanship masters inside the entire Wu family sword tomb breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the scene on the gold list. The entire Wu family sword tomb. For hundreds of years, we have treasured tens of thousands of swords, and the number of swords that can make it to the list is not comparable to that of others alone, which is enough shame. If the ranking is still being suppressed by others, the Wu family really doesn't have the face to meet people anymore. But they seem to have forgotten one thing. That's just ranking 7th on the current golden list.